Okay, let's begin with the word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are so thankful that we can come together to study and to understand our message. And we invite, Lord, your Holy Spirit to be here in our hearts and our minds. As we look again at the daily, we ask, Lord, that our understanding can be clear, that we can put these pieces together, and that we can have a message for the Seventh-day Adventist Church members who are searching for truth. Thank you, Lord, for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Good morning, everyone. We're going to finish off some things here. I was hoping Stephen would be here with a study on that, and that Dwight would be here with a little bit more information about the Catholic Mass. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 1260. So I'm going to look at what Miller says about it first. So the start of the 1260 years. So we've looked at the start of the 508. We want to look at the start of the 1260. It says, we can satisfy any mind that it was among the 10 kings that the 1260 years began. So that's what he's trying to say. We cannot begin it before about 18538. Then the 10 kings became, of course, of one mind. For when they were all converted to the Christian faith, then how natural that they should agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Now, when he talks about the 10 kings, we know that he's really talking about the 7 kings, correct? Or is he talking about the 10 kings? Because you have 3 kingdoms in point 2 were then plucked up, the Heruli, Vandals, and the Ostrogoths, the last of which was the Roman kingdom in 538. So if he's talking about the 10 kings here, they're not all converted. 3 are plucked up, 5 or 7 are converted, correct? Is that how we understand it? I know Stephen had some comments about this, but he's not here. And then he's going to talk about Justinian, Emperor of Constantinople. Now, I'm not sure what he means here, called the dragon. If Justinian was called the dragon, or Constantinople was called the dragon. Gave the Pope of Rome his power, meaning a code of laws on which his power was established, and which were continued until the French abolished them, when Italy was made a republic in 1798. And his seat, the city of Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire and great authority, he made the bishop or pope head over all others, both in the Greek as well as in the Latin churches. So here he's going to be talking about Justinian and his code of laws. So I don't know if people are familiar with Justinian's creed or code. Now, Heidi Hikes is going to make an argument that is exactly what we look for as in 508. It has to do with legislation, and also in 538, so that he can get rid of paganism being the daily. The remainder of the kings acknowledged the supremacy of the Pope and became subject to his ecclesiastical domination about the same time. Thus was the rise and establishment of that power which Daniel calls the little horn, and the abomination that maketh desolate. Paul calls the man of sin that wicked. John calls the same power beast, woman, mystery Babylon, mother of harlots. The power thus described by these inspired prophets, as they tell us, was to exercise power over the kings of the earth and war against the saints, times and a half, or 42 months, which in prophetic language means 1260 years. If this time began when the Emperor Justinian subdued the Ostrogoths and the Arians in Italy and gave power to the Bishop of Rome to rule over all the others, both east and west, and when the city of Rome was made the seat of papal power, and when that power began to be exercised over the kings of the ancient Roman Empire, and a war of extermination began against the saints, who would not yield obedience to the idolatrous worship of papacy, then it must have had its rise in AD 538, to which we add 1260, and it will end in AD 1798. We will now see if the prophecy of the end will warrant us in the beginning, right? So he looks at the beginning of the 1260, and then he's going to look at the end in 1798. Now, when it came to 508, he actually used 1798 as his anchor to go back and find events in 508 that would then begin the 1290. So all of these time periods are connected, and they're connected with the daily being taken away and the abomination of desolation being set up. So we're going to go to the scriptures again and just try to tie up some of these loose ends. So we're going to look at what we were looking at yesterday, dealing with Daniel chapter 8. It says in verse 11, "Yea, he magnified himself to the prince of the host, and from him the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down." So who's the one that magnifies himself against the prince of the host?
Rome.
Okay, it's Rome. So now, in our understanding of the daily that we've had for years, we would say that this is a reference to pagan Rome coming against Christ. But can we also say that this has to do with the papacy coming against Christ? Can we say that? Can we say that it's both? Or is that undoing what we understand about the daily?
Why can't it be both?
Okay, it's a good question. Now, if you look at the next part, when it says, "From him the daily was taken away," this would be from pagan Rome that the daily was taken away. And so the one that magnifies himself against the prince of the host, in our understanding of things, was pagan Rome. And so it's the daily that's taken away from him. Now, we have here some.
It would have to.
What's that?
It would have to fit with the previous context. It would have to fit with the previous context, previous verses.
Well, yes. So we went all through this in the past, right? We know that we're going to have this horn, this little horn that's going to come forth out of one of the winds. It's going to wax exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, toward the pleasant land. This is the direction that Rome comes from. So this is the history of the rise of the Roman kingdom. It's not about the Catholic Church or the papacy. And it's going to wax great, even to the host of heaven. And this is where the new view tries to argue that this has to do with Christ's kingdom in heaven being brought down to the earth, right? So it's going to be taken away by the papacy. Now we know that "it waxed great" is referring to the papal part of this horn. It's going to grow to be great to the point that it's going to exalt itself above the stars of God, right? We know that this is this self-magnification that we see in the papacy. So this is what's being talked about. The host of heaven, the stars of God, same idea. It cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground. So it shows its satanic nature, and it's going to stamp upon them. So the one that treads underfoot the holy city 40 and 2 months for 1260 years is the papacy. So this it is the papacy. And then it says, yea, he magnified himself against the prince of the host. Now, in this expression here, he magnified himself. It's not clear that is there some ambiguity there. So you can't really tell it here. So I'm going to have to go to this other document. And what we want to see here is when it says he magnified himself, in the Hebrew, there is this problem. Now, you can't see it. I'm going to try to go here. It's not going to mean a lot to everyone looking at this because it's Hebrew, but I do have the dictionary part of things. So we're going to look at...
Is it still following the male or female pronoun?
That's what we want to look at here. So it's going to have a preposition, just, it says and add, or va'ad. The prince of the host here. So this is just what this word means here, Sar Hatziba, right? So that's the host. And it says Hagadol, so that means it's going to become great. Now, if you look at this, this is the third person masculine singular, right? The host here is either male or female singular. So it's going to make it, he's going to make himself great because it's masculine, okay? And this word just means from, or so it's just from, out of, by reason of. It means lots of different things. It's a preposition. And then you're going to see that there's these two words in brackets. Hareim, which is, it's the hifal form of a verb. It's a perfect form, which means completed. And it has to do with who is doing the action to what, right? And you're going to see this one is the hopeful, right? So the one means that he magnifies himself, or the other one means that he is magnified. And so in the Hebrew, the texts have actually two different forms. So it's a rare occasion that you're going to have in the Hebrew text two different readings. But these are the two different readings, the two main readings. And so whether he magnified himself or he is magnified, that's not really very clear. And again, you can see it's this one's the third person, perfect. So he was magnified, or it's completed. It's masculine, it's singular. This one is also perfect third person. So it's talking about.
So does that create like a fork in the road of the thought so that you could go down two different paths from this point forward?
Yes, exactly. So there's this ambiguity here of whether you're talking about he magnified himself or he was magnified against the prince of the host. So the fact that it has this ambiguity in these verbal forms lead to different interpretations of this text. So you can see the King James says he magnified himself, right? Instead of he was magnified against the prince of the host. And then you can see this word from him, the daily was taken away. Now, this
So
word,
these active or passive participles mean you can start two different trains of thought for the following verses, right?
well, yeah, these reflexive, what is the word? It's not active or passive because they're not participles.
Yeah, I'm just using English.
Yeah, well, a participle means to magnify, right? Or to be magnified. That would be active or passive, right? Participle. But this one is a verb, right? It's not a participle. So anyway, he's going to, one is reflective. I can't remember the other word, what it is. But anyway, either he does it to himself or it's done to him. So in this case, he's going to magnify himself or he will be magnified against the prince of the host. Now, in the context here of what we're trying to understand, and it says from him, the daily was taken away. This here, so this part, it actually doesn't, it's not masculine. The him is just, no, they're not going to add the him as.
You change the screen.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to go back here. Yeah. Change the screen back to here. So yea, he magnified himself even against the prince of the host, or to the prince of host, and from him. Now the him is just really implied, even though it doesn't put it in italics, because there's no masculine form here. So from someone, the daily was taken away, or the daily was taken away from, but it doesn't say him. Does that make sense to people? Like, we have to put it into English, and not every word, especially things like that, are going to be in italics, just because certain words that are added, like sacrifice, those they're going to put in italics, but they're not, they would just have so many italics if you look at Hebrew and how few words there are. So they're just saying that him is implied, because now you can also see that they translated it by him, the daily was taken away. But we know that that word 4480 means from him. So this is very, it's not clear exactly what's happening in this verse. 8:11 is a problematic verse, even in Hebrew. And even if we didn't have those two different, the hifel or the hofel form of that verb, we would still have a difficulty in trying to understand who's making this action. Now, what we're saying is that the daily is going to be taken from pagan Rome and given to papal Rome. That's the way that we've interpreted it. But as we look at this verse, there's these problems that no matter how you look at it, it doesn't really fit any of our interpretations. So let's just think of it this way. He magnified himself against the prince of the host. So if the he is pagan Rome, and from pagan Rome, the daily was taken away, and the place of pagan Rome's sanctuary was cast down, which is the way that we've interpreted it. The problem there is that the place of his sanctuary doesn't fit the idea of a pagan sanctuary. Now, the fact that it is Mikdash is something that you can apply to a pagan sanctuary, but not the word here, which is makom. Now, if it was makom, with an M, a mem at the end, an M sound, and that sort of, instead of a K sound, but more of a ko.
It sounds like the question of, did God harden Pharaoh's heart, or did he harden his own heart?
Well, maybe a little bit, but the point is, I think there's an ambiguity here because of the fact that we can interpret this two different ways. So if we took that he magnified himself against the prince of the host to be the papacy, and the daily was taken away from, but not him, that is, he took away the daily from, or it, that is the one that magnified himself. Now, we've said all the time that the it refers to the feminine, which refers to the transgression of desolation, to the papal power. And so when we have the he here, the masculine, then we say, well, that must be pagan Rome. So you can see we've looked at this interpretation this way. But we could also say that this is a person now being referred to, not the papal power as such, but actually an individual. So we could argue that the he is referring to this power, whether it's pagan or papal. And then the place of his sanctuary being cast down, if it's pagan Rome, we also have two different ways that we can look at it. One is we can look at that the place of his sanctuary that's going to be cast down is Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. But we could also apply it to Rome. But we could also apply it, or could we apply it to the papacy? Because this is how Crozier applied it. So he applied it to Rome, but he was using it as a parallel with this counterfeit. So we can see the problem here. The problem isn't just about this verse. The problem has to do with how we understand the two desolating powers. So the new view of the daily can't really use the verses in the way that it does. But they have used the ambiguity to try to force an interpretation upon the text. But we have to be careful that we're not going to do the same thing. Now, we just looked at 538. So we know that this is about the setting up of the papal power, right? When we get to verse 13, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision, which is the chazon, concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot. Now, if you look here in the King James, it says to both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. You don't see a word, a Hebrew number for the word both, correct? It just says, a number for sanctuary, a number for host. But notice they don't put any italics there to say that both is being added. And you'll see here in Young's literal translation, they're going to put both as well.
Is a duality implied somewhere else?
Okay, so yeah, that's what I want to look at now. I know I hate looking at this Hebrew because people don't know what it's hard to look at if you don't know what you're looking at. But I'm going to go back to this passage here in Hebrew. So we're going to go back to, so this is verse 11. Here we have this preposition, which with a vav at the beginning. This is just like a new part of a sentence. The prince of the host, he exalts himself against him from, and notice that this word from, like the order of this sentence is completely different than you see it in the King James. So they put and from himself. Now he magnifies himself, and from himself, or from, because this is the magnification. So I think that this has been completely translated wrong. That is, the translation of this verse, and what I'm going to try to do is maybe get this into what I think it should be. So if you look at this, you have the order of the sentence, you have this preposition, you have the prince of the host mentioned, you have Gadol, right? So Hegadol, to magnify, right? So this is, and it's going to be a hiffle. So he's going to magnify. He's magnifying or being magnified. And then it says, and from. So the from isn't he magnifies himself and from later on, it's going to be earlier. And this vav here in front of the beginning of this is a thing that connects. Now, this is also can be, because this is a preposition from, but there's a form here, from them, or something like that. I'm going to have to look this up because I'm not quite sure this form here. It just says it's a preposition, but it has a vav at the beginning and a vav at the end. Memenu means from, but it has this vav here, which I think is giving us a new phrase. And then you have this one where it talks about to rise up or lift up himself. And then you're going to have the tamid, ha-tamid, that's this word here. Now it has the article in front of it, and it says it's an adverb, because that's normally the form for an adverb. But the problem is that there is not a, so it's, in the way that this is, it's not how you see it other places. You're not going to see the article in front of tamid in other places in the Bible. So this is, I wouldn't think it is an adverb. And then you're going to have this other part, which means to throw down or to cast down, to hurl, to fling. And then you're going to have this word makon. It has here mekvon, just because there's this vav in there. So it's not the usual form you see it. It's the masculine singular. But we've had a lot of masculine plurals. So this now is a masculine singular, so it's not related to the other ones. And then you're going to have mikdash. So when you put this sentence together, it doesn't actually make sense. That is, in Hebrew, it's not clear. It's very ambiguous. Now, I want to go to verse 13. So in verse 13, and I heard one saint said, so that's the saint Kodesh, and he spoke there to, and this is just the singular, which is to say, so it's kind of a, and said, he spoke and said, to one, so that's just the word ihad, which means one, and that's this other saint, sacred, holy, set apart, Kodesh, but it has this vav in it, kodvesh, so it just means it's masculine singular, to one saint, and then it's going to have this word palmonai, so he's going to say to palmonai, and then he's going to speak, right, and admit with against, or how long, or until when shall be, right, and then you're going to have.
I wonder if F.C. Gilbert, did F.C. Gilbert ever make a stab at these verses since he was Hebrew?
That's a good question. Probably, because he's addressed this before, because he wrote a lot about the daily, and he was on the side of the pioneer view of the daily. And then you're going to have this ha-tamid again. So how long shall be the vision? Shall be the vision, chazon, and the daily, and the transgression. So you're going to see there's a vav in front of it. Means that, like, this is a new phrase. And this is the desolation, transgression of desolation. To give, it's just a verb, to give, and the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. or trampled. So one thing is you don't see the word both in here, right? So that was one of the points. Now, is there significance that we don't see the word both that you see in these other translations?
But was there a connective, an and?
No. No, so it's not two different things, right? That's kind of my point. Because to give both the sanctuary and the host, now we've taken this as this is two different things. So the sanctuary refers to what? And I'll go back to the King James.
The 2,300 days.
Okay, so the sanctuary is the 2,300 days, and the host?
We say that's the 2520.
Yeah. Now, if we say that the trotting underfoot of the host is the 2520, what 2520 do we normally make it to be in this movement? What have we said? Which one refers to the host?
No, I think it's the second one from 677 because of the restoration at the end of the trampling.
Yeah, so we generally try to
That's right.
say that it's referring to 677 to 1844, correct?
Yeah, and the restoration afterward.
Right, but we would have to say it's 1798, and why would that be?
But no.
Well, it has to do.
Well, yeah, there's restoration after 1798 also.
Yeah, so when we look at the papacy, it's the one that treads down. Now we can see that in Daniel 7:23. It talks about this treading down. It's not clear because it's just talking about the fourth beast. But when we get to Revelation chapter 11, and it talks about the 1260, they're going to tread, the holy city shall they tread underfoot 40 and 2 months. The treading down is specifically the latter half of the 2520 for northern Israel. The scattering is the first half of the 2520 for northern Israel, because that's Daniel chapter 12, verse 7, where it talks about the scattering of the power of the holy people. That's the first 1260. So when we look at this, we also agreed that the chazon that's going to be talked about, the vision concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, that's the word chazon, is a reference to the 2520 for northern Israel. Right? Because there's a chazon concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation. So those are going to end in 1798. But we've taken that this sanctuary, because it says to give the sanctuary, we just put to give the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot, what is that referring to then? Because there are two different words sanctuary. This one's mikdash and this one's kodesh. Now, in 8:14, is this the heavenly sanctuary that's going to be cleansed?
Yes, because that's the holy sanctuary.
Right. Now, this sanctuary here is mikdash. Now, mikdash can't refer to the heavenly sanctuary. But is there a sanctuary on earth that can be referred to as mikdash and be connected to the host?
I suppose so, because all sanctuaries serve a host.
Okay, but can we say that the sanctuary and the host that's being trodden underfoot are the same thing?
Well, it seems like the Hebrew implies that they are the same thing.
They can't be the same
Islam.
thing.
Okay. So is God's people, is his church a sanctuary?
Yes.
Okay, so Dwight says they can't be the same thing. So what would be your argument that they can't be?
The point being, there's a delineation in these two verses. When we're addressing the fact that the daily and the transgression of desolation are to trod underfoot the sanctuary, it's not trodding underfoot God's sanctuary.
Right, so it's not trotting underfoot the heavenly sanctuary.
Right.
Right. So that can't be referring to the sanctuary in heaven being trodden underfoot.
In this type of a situation, the host, of course, is on the earth. Now, the host, as we are aware, can be trodden because under the papal dominion, the papists sought to press their view onto everyone, and anyone that did not agree with their view was summarily dismissed, and whether they were tortured, thrown in prison, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they weren't able to do that with the sanctuary, but they were definitely able to set up a false sanctuary.
Okay. So I'm trying to look at this with fresh eyes. So I'm not trying to like force an interpretation. I want to look at what's being said and try to see if there's something that we're missing.
Can sanctuary be an adjective that modifies host, the host that belonged to the sanctuary?
No, it can't be. Now, what if we did it this way? So here's another option. The daily is going to be trampled down by, or the sanctuary is going to be trampled down by the daily, and the host is going to be trampled down by the transgression of desolation. So we have different choices. We can say that both the daily and the transgression of desolation trample down the sanctuary and the host. We could say that only the transgression of desolation tramples down the sanctuary and the host, right? Or we could say that the daily is the one that's trampling down the sanctuary, and this sanctuary then would be the earthly sanctuary. And the transgression of desolation will trample down the host. So if we're going to look at those, how have we understood it in the past? Who does the trampling down of the sanctuary and the host in our understanding of this movement? How have we taken this?
Little horn power.
So we'd say it's the little horn power. So that's going to be the papacy, right?
Correct.
But if we took this, that the daily and the transgression of desolation both do a trampling down, can we say that pagan Rome trampled down the sanctuary as well as Babylon itself?
That'd be a very interesting application.
Yeah. And that it's the transgression of desolation that's going to trample down the host itself. Because we just say there's two desolating powers. They're both going to persecute God's people. But when we look at this transition from the daily to the transgression of desolation, we've always focused upon the sanctuary and the host as being trodden underfoot by the transgression of desolation. Now, if we go back to verse 11, and it says, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. So here you're going to have the host mentioned again, and you're going to have the sanctuary mentioned again. right? So we're
Right.
going to have both these mentioned. Now, now I was wrong about this word sanctuary. This word sanctuary is Kodesh, as well as this word sanctuary. The other one is Mikdash. So I knew I was doing something wrong. So the one in verse 11 is Mikdash, but the one in verse 13 and 14 are both Kodesh. Okay, so we have to go back there. So I knew I was doing that wrong, but I should have looked at it earlier. Now, we're saying that this sanctuary, the place of his sanctuary being cast down, this could refer to Rome's sanctuary. It could also refer to the destruction of Jerusalem, because that's how the angel is going to interpret this verse. As it gives this vision, it's going to give an interpretation that's going to talk about the destruction of Jerusalem by Rome, right? And it's going to quote Deuteronomy 28 to refer to that. So is there something here in these verses that already implies, because we know that this is talking about a counterfeit power that's counterfeiting the ministry of Christ, specifically the week of Christ is being counterfeited here. Can we see that? Do we agree that this daily and transgression of desolation are a counterfeit of the week of Christ?
If there's two tramplers, are there also two tramplees? Is it a two-stage trampler tramples on a victim, trampolee?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe. But the first thing that we're going to see, the first thing that we want to establish is that there is a true covenant week, which Christ ministers on earth for 3.5 years and then in heaven for 3.5 years. It's connected to 30 days. It's also connected to a baptism, right? And I'm going to draw this on the board here to try to establish this and see what it is we're looking at. But we know that this is about a counterfeit. Chapter 8 is about a counterfeit that parallels what it's counterfeiting. Now, it doesn't parallel it perfectly because it's a counterfeit. So things don't go necessarily in the same order. And the sanctuary animals that are being used in this counterfeit are not, they're not clean animals. And we also see that there's something about the sanctuary here that is a problem, because we know there's a Mikdash and we know there's a Kodesh, and we know that it's going to be the Kodesh that's going to be cleansed at the end of 2,300 years. So maybe what we'll do is we'll draw this now, even though I haven't really figured out how to draw it yet, and just see if we can get this to make sense. So we have to keep these verses in mind as we look at this. So here's the counterfeit. This counterfeit is going to have 508 and 538. And we're going to go 723 BC. So you're going to have 1260. And then you're going to have 1798 over here. And this is the taking away of the daily. You're going to have these 30 years. And this is going to be marked by a baptism on December 25th, right, of Clovis. And Clovis represents paganism. And his conversion is to this power that's then going to rule for 1,260 years, correct? Now, the daily being taken away, it's going to be taken away from this power, which is paganism, and it's going to be given to this power, which is papalism. Now, when we talked about the place of his sanctuary being cast down, what is that referring to? In the way that we've always understood it. When does that occur?
I'm thinking of the difference between active and passive.
Yeah, well, don't think that way yet, because I don't think that's what I want to look at yet. So when is the place of his sanctuary cast down? According to our understanding of how we've always understood these things. The place of his sanctuary being Rome, when is Rome cast down?
By the trumpet powers, starting at what, 470 something?
Okay. So pagan Rome is going to fall. So maybe the year right now is not important. But it's going to happen before here. So you're going to have Rome is going to be overthrown by these Germanic tribes that come in and conquer Rome, right? That's how we take it.
It's a slow process of dismantling.
Okay. So we're just going to say, yeah, so somewhere here, we're going to say the sanctuary is being cast down. Now, I'm just going to put this underneath here. I'll put December 25th up here.
Does the Hebrew reflect the idea of things happening slowly as a process or suddenly as a fiat accompli? An accomplished feat?
Hebrew only has a completed and an incomplete tense, and then the participle. It doesn't have any other verbal forms. So here you're going to have 30 years, and then you're going to have the baptism in 27. And then you're going to have this week, right? So this week here is going to be the week of Christ, 1260 and 1260, we'll just say. And this is going to be 34 AD. So this is earth. This is heaven. But these are counterfeits of what happens here, earth and heaven. So earthly and heavenly counterfeits of Christ's earthly ministry and heavenly ministry. So Christ's on earth, he's in heaven here. And then you're going to have 70 AD. And this is going to be the sanctuary, or the place of his sanctuary, is going to be cast down. So Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And so this doesn't line up perfectly. You can't take this 30 years and put it over here like you can, but you can attach a baptism to the 30 years here at the end of 30 years, here at the beginning of 30 years. So is there a counterfeit place of his sanctuary? That is, can the place of his sanctuary refer to both Rome, the one who does the casting down of the place of this sanctuary? Are they connected? That's the question. Is that what this verse is trying to tell us? That this is about a counterfeit that's going to repeat a history or demonstrate or parallel a history that's going to happen to what it's counterfeiting?
That's kind of the premise of the pattern of Christ chart that we made at the beginning of this message.
Right.
That paganism or Satan repeats the sequence of Christ.
Yes. So he repeats it, not necessarily identically, but in a lot of ways that are very similar. So we've argued about this place of his sanctuary, but the word that the place of the sanctuary that's being used in Daniel is one that refers to God's sanctuary, never to a pagan sanctuary. But do we have to have the true first understood to realize that this counterfeit is in a sense built upon this foundation,
Good logic.
right? So maybe part of the problem that people have had in trying to understand this is that they haven't understood the 2520, and they've been trying to figure out how to translate something that is actually not easy to translate, and that ambiguity is intentional. Now, we know that there's also an ambiguity in Daniel 8:14 itself, where it talks about the 2,300 evening morning. And it doesn't say evenings and mornings, as most people try to translate it. The vision of the evening morning, it's not evenings and mornings or evenings, mornings, it's evening, morning, it's singular. And this is ambiguous, but what does the ambiguity mean prophetically? Why does God use ambiguous language? What's the reason for it?
Instead of placing this as a literal situation, it's making it a figurative situation.
Right.
It's putting it outside the literal.
Right. And we take that into account sometimes, but not always. Correct?
Agreed.
And so here we have a vision that we know is figurative, right from the very beginning. And we can see that its figures that are being used are sanctuary symbols. But they're being, and even some sanctuary terminology, such as the one of being taken away. That's a sanctuary term. It's used always in connection with the lifting up of a heave offering. So that room means to take away in the sense of to lift up, like a heave offering. We can see that the animals, but something is not right. That is, this is not God's sanctuary. And yet, all of these actions that are being done to who? And to what?
God's people and his sanctuary.
God's people and his sanctuary. And when it talks about the Prince of Princes, well, this is Christ himself. And Christ has his own covenant week. He has its that they're counterfeiting. So they're counterfeiting the covenant week of Christ. So I don't think that we can say, well, the sanctuary here just refers to the Rome being destroyed or cast down. Because in the casting down of Rome, we can parallel that with the casting down by pagan Rome of Jerusalem. The two are connected. But now when we look at the papacy itself, the papacy is now going to repeat all of the things that paganism has done, but it's going to be baptized in order to do this. Correct?
Yeah, so we're following kind of like two mental roads.
Right. We're following two paths because in order to look at the counterfeit, we need to look at the actual of what's being counterfeited. Now, I would say that what happens in verse 14 is we're brought back to the actual. When it says, and he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Because what is he asking about? What's the question regarding? If we're going to put it in different words.
It's being asked about the trampling down more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is the counterfeit.
Right.
So it's asking about this counterfeit worship, this counterfeit covenant week. How long is this going to continue? Because this counterfeit is attacking the sanctuary and the host. Now, the sanctuary I would think primarily refers to the literal earthly sanctuary and its services under the daily, because the daily is trotting them underfoot by counterfeiting them. Now, the host, this is primarily the work of the transgression of desolation. Now, one of the things about the host, why would the word host be used in connection with the papacy and the word sanctuary be in connection with the daily? So think of them as counterfeits. Because what is the daily counterfeiting?
The earthly ministration.
Okay. And what is the Catholic Church counterfeiting?
The heavenly aspect.
And how does it do that?
Through the Mass.
By putting itself in between, in the place of.
Yeah, by the Catholic Mass, right? Now, so we can look at the counterfeit itself, but both of these are also desolating powers. So they're not just counterfeiting God's earthly and heavenly sanctuary, but they're also persecutory powers. They're desolating powers, correct?
Right.
So there are two aspects here. There's one of the counterfeit, the other of the persecution. And in trotting underfoot the sanctuary and the host, this refers to the persecution. But can it also refer to, can it have a double meaning? Can it also refer to it being a counterfeit?
Don't see why not.
It would have to.
Yeah, okay. So we can see that there's a lot of information in these verses that we haven't seen. That would be my position. That we fully understand them, I don't think that we do. And I think in this movement and in Adventist history, we've changed our interpretation of some of these passages over time, even while we're still maintaining the pioneer view of the daily, that there's these two desolating powers and that the daily refers to paganism. We know that Miller didn't fully understand, because he didn't look at the Hebrew, that this is different than chapter 11:31 and 12:11, where it talks about being taken away. He didn't know that it's two different Hebrew words, room and sur. And so he applied some of the same ideas to this here in this taken away in verse 11 to what he sees in 11:31 and 12:11. But he correctly went to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Now let's look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, because Ellen White comments on this with a whole chapter. And she's going to make it very, very clear that the view that is to be understood is that we have paganism, and it's going to make room for papalism by it being taken out of the way. And she's going to use taken out of the way in the sense, not just that it's removed, because she's going to talk about that, but also that paganism is incorporated into papalism. Now, Paul's going to be referring to this, right? So when he's talking about this, he's referring to Daniel. Let no man deceive you by any means, verse 3. For that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Ellen White, when she quotes this, she connects it to what verse in Daniel? What verse is she going to connect this so that we know that the new interpretation of this is wrong? Because, and also that the interpretation of Uriah Smith is wrong regarding Daniel chapter 11. So that gives you a hint. So which verse is Ellen White going to connect this with?
Wouldn't it be more like Daniel 11:40?
She's going to connect it to Daniel 11, verse 36.
Okay.
So the king shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. Now, when we look at this, magnifying himself above every god, Uriah Smith tries to make this France, but Ellen White makes this the papacy. But we know that this language is also very similar to chapter 8, right? Where it says, he shall magnify himself even to the prince of the host. So we would say, well, the prince of the host is Christ, and the one that magnifies himself to the prince of the host is pagan Rome. And we can look later on in chapter 8, where it's going to talk about this. And it's going to say that Rome is going to come in. It's going to quote in 8:23. It's going to quote basically Deuteronomy 28, the king of fierce countenance, and a language you shall not know, right? So that's going to be Rome. And by his power, his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully and shall prosper in practice and destroy the mighty and the holy people. So this is Rome, right? And we would just say, well, this is pagan Rome being talked about. And then it says, and through his policy, he shall also cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. So again, we would apply this to pagan Rome. He also shall stand up against the prince of princes. Again, pagan Rome. But he shall be broken without hand. Well, who's broken without hand? What is this a reference to? Now, we've taken that this is, Rome isn't conquered necessarily. Okay, how do we take this? He shall
Daniel 2.
Okay, so you could go to Daniel 2. So the stone is going to smite the feet of the image. So this would refer to Rome at the very end. Now, is that how we always applied this verse? Daniel 8:25.
Not always.
No, not always, right? So if you're going to go to this verse here and you look in Daniel in the Revelation, he's going to connect you to Deuteronomy 28. But he's gonna jump back and forth between papal and pagan Rome. Papal Rome is going to be mighty, but not by his own power. So he's going to say that this power, the power that's mighty, but not by his own power, is papal Rome, which has the armies of the nations around it, providing it power. So there's different views on
It
this.
also has demonic power.
Well, I don't see him say that here.
No, he doesn't say that.
No. So then he's going to say, through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. Rome has been distinguished above all other powers for a policy of craft, by means of which it has brought the nation under its control. This is true of both pagan and papal Rome. Thus by peace it destroyed many. So he applies some of these things to pagan and papal Rome, some to papal Rome. But can we say that all of this applies both to pagan and papal Rome?
In a sense, yes, because it's the same demonic power that powers both of them.
Yeah, because it's going to take the daily. And so what happened under pagan Rome is also going to happen under papal Rome. So we could take this when it says he shall stand up against the prince of princes. This can refer to what happens in 31 AD. But can we also say it's what happens during the time of the papacy? That's the question.
Sounds logical.
We know that the little horn
The history
represents,
bits.
yeah, the little horn is both pagan and papal Rome. And we can see that the it and the he show this fluctuation, sometime referring to pagan and sometime to papal. But we can also see that pagan and papal are really tied together. Now, even this idea, in the latter time of their kingdom, when transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. Now, this is talking here what's going to be expounded upon in Daniel chapter 11. Now, that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. So this is referring to who? Not in his power. It's going to be the king here, the great horn that is between the eyes, which is the first king. So you're going to have Greece is going to have these four kingdoms stand up, but they're not going to have the same power of Alexander. And then in the latter time of their kingdom, when transgressors
Not
are
as strong.
What's that? What'd you say?
Not as strong, not as fast.
Yeah, and they definitely, yeah, they're just not as powerful as Alexander. Now, in the latter time of their kingdom, you're going to have Rome arise, right? He's a king of fierce countenance, understanding dark sentences. He stands up. So this is Rome. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. So here, Uriah Smith's going to say, well, this is the papacy. But does this also refer to pagan Rome? And if it does, how would it apply?
Yes, because Ellen White says that Satan primarily, but Rome secondarily.
Well, talking
So
about,
it's the same power driving both.
okay, so you're talking about in Revelation chapter 12, the great red dragon.
Yeah,
It's
but the point
primarily
is,
Satan. Yeah, it's primarily Satan, but secondarily pagan Rome.
but the same power driving both.
Yeah. So this could be referring to a satanic power. And he shall destroy wonderfully or secretly, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Now, the mighty and the holy people, if we look at this, because remember, this is an explanation of the vision to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. This happens with pagan Rome and with papal Rome. That is, they're both desolating powers. So can we say that this is referring to Rome, both pagan and papal?
Right, both 1260s.
So,
Yeah, so I think that what we start to see here is that both are tied together, both are counterfeits, and both are desolating powers, and both, they do the same work, but at a different time. Now, when he says he shall magnify himself in his heart, well, we can go all the way back to Nebuchadnezzar. Does he do this?
yes.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
principle of the Gadol.
Right. So we can see that this self-magnification is not just a characteristic of the papacy, it's a characteristic of paganism. Now, we know that pagan Rome stands up against Christ, but we can also argue that papal Rome is standing up against the Prince of Princes. Because pagan Rome crucifies Christ. Does the papacy crucify Christ?
In a sense.
As a counterfeit, right? So in the Catholic Mass, they are going to counterfeit the crucifixion of Christ, because Christ is not being crucified. You know, his body and blood are not, you know, the bread and the wine, but they're basically blaspheming that they can do this. that they can crucify the Son of God afresh in the Catholic Mass, that they can bring him down from heaven by the power of the priest. But when it says he shall be broken without hand, we can see that this can't just be referring to a single person, a Roman emperor, or just a single power, Rome pagan or Rome papal. That this is referring to Rome. Rome is going to be the one that's broken without hand. Now, when Rome is broken up without hand, it's not even going to be in the pagan or the papal phase in the way that we see in these two desolating powers. It's going to be at the very end.
When he comes to his end, and none shall help him.
Right. So the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Therefore, shut up thou the vision, for it shall be for many days. Now, what does the shut up mean? We talked about this yesterday.
Close to the understanding.
Well, it's going to be hidden, right? So this is a hiding. Now, this isn't a sealing up. It's a little bit different. So what would be the difference between something being shut up and something being sealed?
I guess if it's just hidden, then it would still be available to some who manage to find it, instead of being sealed where no one can find
Okay. So, what does it mean when something's sealed? Like the book of Daniel is sealed. Think about how it's unsealed.
it was unsealed by circumstances when the Christians realized that a historical event was spoken of in the book of Daniel, and that they were
Okay. Yeah. So you have historical events, you have seals, and those seals come to view in history. Now, can something that's been shut up, does it need, how is it seen?
You're straining my brain.
Okay, so we have this word shut up, and it means to stop by implication, to repair, to keep secret, right? So that's the way we're using it. It's secret. So what is it about secrets in the Bible?
Well, then they have a code that can unlock the secret
Okay, so
somewhere.
well, and I would say actually it's shut up, or it's shut up in a secret sense because it itself is kind of a key.
What if you said it was just closed off?
Closed off to our understanding?
Yes.
Right. So it's closed off to our understanding. Now, but we need to understand it. So secrets are meant to be understood how?
Prayer and application.
They're like hidden gems.
Right.
Or I was,
And I would say that
I
they're
was
not,
thinking like a key to open it.
yeah, they're like a key. There's something about what we're doing, what this movement has done, is that we've looked back at prophecies that were fulfilled in the past that have been unsealed. And now we're digging for this buried treasure, this secret, this thing that's been hidden.
Oh, the
That has-
2520.
Yeah.
helped us to do that, because then we could look back and like reverse engineer some of these prophecies.
So the seals have already been opened in that sense, right? The book of Daniel was unsealed, but was everything that was in that book understood?
No, it meant just the portion that applied to their time.
Right. So prophetic events unsealed that book. But we now can go back and look at those things. So remember, it's Daniel 12, verse 4, where we have these two words together. But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words, that is, hide the words, and seal the book, even to the time of the end. So when is the book unsealed?
At the time of the end,
And it's unsealed by what?
historical events.
Historical events. So prophecy being fulfilled. But then the next part, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Running to and fro means to search. And in this case, the book of Daniel or the scriptures. And then knowledge or understanding shall be increased. And that's what we teach, is that that this increase of light began when the book of Daniel was unsealed. But was it understood just because it was unsealed?
No, the understanding was a process. It was just opened so that it could be investigated.
Right. So we now are in a time where we're running to and fro. That's what we're doing right now. Now, I'm not necessarily happy with all of our conclusions at this point. Basically, what I've done is I've kind of torn it apart, or we've torn it apart. We've looked at these verses and we see that there's problems. And the first step to knowledge is recognizing that you don't know something. Because if you think you know something, you're not going to see what's in front of you. And so we're examining this foundation. Now, we have established a number of things, that 508 and 538 are based upon an understanding of the daily being paganism. And that if you change that, if you say that the daily is Christ's heavenly ministry, you don't just undo 508 and 538, you also undo the 2300 days. But we can agree that there are things that we missed in these verses. Now, if you're going to take the point, and Dwight, did you look more into the Catholic Mass?
I didn't get as much time yesterday as I thought.
Yeah, I looked more into it. There's definitely nothing that we can say that the Catholic Mass started in 508. Really, what often they do is they point to the Council of Trent, which is in 1570 or something like that. 1470, 1570. Or 1571, somewhere around there. Anyway, it's in the 16th century that you get what we would now call the Catholic Mass, the way that it's done. So this, now it's hard sometimes because mostly you just see Catholic sites, and of course they say the Mass started, at the Lord's Supper. But one thing that they will all admit is that it hasn't always been done the same. And in the 4th century, because of the Edict of Toleration, you now are going to have, different types of formalities being added to this. At least that's what they argue. They say it went from the home now into the church. So the Mass used to be practiced in the home. Obviously, there wouldn't have been priests officiating. They wouldn't be turning the bread and the wine into the body and the blood of Christ and things like that. So you don't have, something that in 508 that you can say, well, now they have taken Christ's heavenly ministry and brought it down to earth. This is just a slow progression over time of the Catholic Mass. It's not something that you could put in 508 and give it.
Yeah, so I'm wondering when the bishops became priests, intercessors.
Well, in different places at different times, but that would be earlier, but definitely it's not 508. So you have the bishop, the Roman bishops have lots of power even early on, in the 4th century. I mean, that's the whole reason why Constantine starts to politicize his power religiously, because of the power that you have with the Catholic Church. But so this now the way that Heidi Hikes does it is he tries to use legislation as the start of 508. And we had looked at the beginning that Miller also attached Justinian's code to 538. So what Heidi Hikes does is he tries to attach legislation to 508. The problem is there's lots of legislation being done all the time, and it becomes kind of an arbitrary exercise. Plus, of course, we see the problem of getting rid of the daily being paganism. Daniel chapter 8 doesn't make any sense, and neither does 11:31 or 12:11. Right now, Daniel 12:11. Let's look at this. From the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, or the daily be taken away, the abomination that maketh and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there should be 1,290 days. Now, some people read this and say, well, the time that it's taken away is when the abomination that maketh desolate is set up. Now, the word set up means to be given. And we know that we're starting the 1290, but it's going to be another 30 years until the 1260 of the scattering of the power of the holy people is accomplished. So we know there's this 30-year difference between the end of the 1260 for paganism and when paganism is taken out of the way. It's taken out of the way 30 years early. So it's going to start a period of 1,290 years. And then you're going to have the 1,335 years that are going to be this blessing. So Angela says three-part Council of Trent has these different dates. So it's in the mid 16th century, the 1500s. Now there's a lot more here in Daniel chapter 12 that we could look at. But the main point is that the daily being taken away cannot be Christ's heavenly ministry. And let's look at 11:31. So we just kind of finish off with this. So this is the other place where it talks about the daily being taken away. An arm shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength. So this sanctuary of strength is Rome, correct? Is that how we understand it?
That's what we've been saying.
Yes.
Okay. So this is going to be Mikdash. And now so why do we say that this is the sanctuary? What is the sanctuary of strength? Exactly what is it that happens that pollutes the sanctuary of strength? So when it says an arm shall stand on his part, whose part is this?
Papal Rome's part.
Okay.
The other people's army.
Right. So we have papal Rome. So the ship of Kittim in verse 30, that's the ships of Kittim refer to what? Instead of me telling you. These are the judgments that come upon pagan Rome based on Revelation chapter 8.
The trumpet powers.
That's the trumpet's powers. Now, well, so or would we take this as being what's going to happen when he has intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant? What is this referring to? So we have the barbarian tribes coming in. Okay, what does it mean he shall have indignation against the Holy Covenant?
That he would have issues,
Well, that's those that,
Okay, so let Dwight,
that he would have issues with the covenant of Christ with man.
okay, so this is paganism coming in, and they're going to be attacking Christianity in its form, right?
Right.
Okay. So they're not just attacking Rome, they're also going to be attacking Christianity as they see it. Now, this is going to be true Christianity and false Christianity, because it's just they don't make a distinction between Christianities. Now, eventually they have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. So who are the ones that forsake the Holy Covenant that they have intelligence with?
those that favor the papal teachings.
Right. So they're going to start taking the papal teachings. So they're going to have intelligence. And then these powers, these nations that are barbarians, these barbarian tribes, they're going to take over Western Rome primarily. And they are then going to become Catholic. Right? Is that what it's telling us?
Right.
And it says, arms shall stand on his part. So these pagan powers are now going to start standing on the part of the papacy. And then it says, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength and shall take away the daily. So we're saying, we were saying
It's
this.
interesting that the Germanic tribes become Aryan, semi-Christian, but they're still spoken of as pagan.
Okay, so they become Aryan first, right? Now Aryan is not really pagan. I mean, so yes, so they become Aryan first. So they're going to be aligned more with the East than the West.
So they're still thought of as pagan in the province.
But Clovis isn't even, well, he does become Aryan and then he becomes baptized Catholic, like Roman Catholic. So then he's no longer Aryan when he's baptized. Okay, so when they pollute the sanctuary of strength, we're going to say that this is Rome. So arms are standing on the part of the papacy. Why are they then polluting the sanctuary of strength? How are they polluting it?
By bringing in false doctrines.
Okay, so they're going to take away the daily, they're going to take away paganism, and now they're going to place the abomination that maketh desolate. And this is going to be papalism. So Rome, it says here, if we're taking this correctly, is paganism. Pagan Rome is going to be replaced by papal Rome. Now, I mean, this is how we understand it. I don't know, maybe even looking at this, maybe there's something that we're missing. And such as do wickedly against the Holy Covenant shall be corrupt by flatteries, and the people that do know their God shall be strong and shall do exploits. So this is a controversy that happens between the false and the true. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword and be by flame, by captivity, by spoil many days. So this is talking about the persecution under the papacy, right? Now, that's how we've understood it. Now, I still think that there's lots that we're missing. That's part of my problem, because as we look at Daniel chapter 8 and we see what we've seen, And now we start looking at Daniel chapter 11 and Daniel chapter 12. I'm not sure
No,
that I fully
you,
understand this.
you isolated ambiguity in the Hebrew in Daniel 8. Is there more ambiguous Hebrew in 11 and 12 also?
Well, yeah, there is, right? Now, I think in some ways, because I've looked at Daniel 11 and we've gone through it. We did an extensive study on it, and we basically just laid out how we have always understood it. We didn't really go into tearing it apart or anything. But I think it's something that we have to look at further as we start to understand the 2520 more fully in its relationship as being a counterfeit and how this history relates. So, I don't have any answers at this point. All I'm saying is that there are things here that we can see we're not really always sure what's being talked about. I mean, Uriah Smith says it means this, but if I was just reading it on my own, I might come to a different conclusion on parts of it. And the parts that I have sometimes, is this talking about pagan Rome or is this talking about papal Rome? And we know that the two parallel each other, right? So what pagan Rome does, papal Rome will do. So it's something that I think we need to delve into a bit more. Now, so what we're going to try to do here, we got Wednesday and Thursday that I want to finish off this section of the daily and go back to notebook 1 and to Jeff's studies. I don't think we've got all the answers here to everything, but we do see some things a little bit differently. That is, we know kind of that we have some problems that we have to sort through. And one thing that we can see, and I keep repeating it, is that the daily has to be paganism. Because if it's not, none of this really makes any sense. Because once you start talking about the taking away of the daily, now in this case, Daniel 11, the taking away of the daily is not room, it's sir. And that means it needs to be removed. That is, paganism needs to be removed to make way for the papacy. But it's not just removed. The papacy also has to take the role that paganism had, but it has to do it in a different way. It's now going to be those that forsake the Holy Covenant. At least that's the way that I understand it. But this is a group that is baptized paganism. Okay, so we're gonna look at that in the next 2 days. We're gonna try to nail this down a little bit more solidly regarding the start of this period. We're not going to deal so much with 1798. We're mostly just concerned about the taking away of the daily and the setting up of the abomination of desolation. And we're going to come back and review a little bit dealing with what Ellen White is saying as well. So we address that in quite a bit of detail, but I want to just review that and see how it fits in with what we've studied here. Because Ellen White says they were united upon the correct view of the daily. And we don't want to be tampering with the correct view of the daily. Right? When we have new light, it's going to make old light shine brighter. And Ellen White's very careful in how she says different things. She's never careless. But sometimes her being careful does open room for the opponents of the truth, because if we don't understand something, they can take her words and twist them. And that's what we saw with her statement in early writings, is that the new view of the daily, they could say, well, this is connected with time setting. And we know that's not the case now. There's no time setting that's ever been shown to be connected with the new view of the daily, or a view of the daily in 1850. So when Ellen White's writing about that, nobody's time setting by reinterpreting the daily. And they also tried to make it that Crozier was teaching the new view of the daily, which we saw last time, is not the case. Crozier wasn't teaching the new view of the daily. He wasn't even addressing it. He wasn't even addressing Hatamid in the book of Daniel. Not a single time does he address it. So this, if we're going to sort this out properly, we have to understand everything that was happening then. And then we need to put this together so that we can have a clear picture. And so that we can also have a message to present to people. That's why we're doing this. We could just be satisfied in saying, well, the pioneers had the correct view of the daily, whatever that was, right? Because I think mostly that's what we've done. We haven't really understood the daily itself, what the pioneers really understood. We would just know they had the correct view, had to do with daily being paganism. But then if you were going to go and show someone from the scriptures the pioneer view of the daily, you're going to have a hard time doing it if you don't understand it. And I think that we can understand it. I don't think it's beyond our understanding. But it just takes a bit of work and God's spirit and obedience and all those things. So let's close with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thanks again for the time that we had to study. Be with us through the rest of this week in our personal study as we dig into these things. We ask, Lord, that as we examine sacred things, that we can have respect towards them, that human ideas, human expressions can not be there to confuse things. Help us, Lord, to understand these scriptures. And we pray, Lord, for this movement, that you can bring a unity through the studying of your word according to the rules that you have given. And we pray this and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.